topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. It's that time of the week, and of course, I love to be with you guys. So for those of you who have got our books, thank you, because partial profits from our book go to global entrepreneurs, and we have changed quite a few lives. So if you have not got your copy, do get your copy of Expert to Influencer. It's going to help you become the influencer no matter where you're at in an authentic way, and it will help you create the impact that you want. And you can get a copy of The Entrepreneur's Garden, which helps you set up a great business. Actually, one of our readers shared that she grew her business by 44%. And I am encouraging you to give that 1 hour of your time every month to someone with no strings attached. So folks, let's bring our guest on, Dr. Betsy Holmberg.
Hi there, Divya. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm quite well. Glad to be here.
Well, fantastic. Glad to have you. So we usually start at the beginning. Do you have a moment that you recall even today from your childhood?
Yes, and I have two that speak to slightly different pieces. So the first is that I had obliviousness to myself as a child, where I just didn't catch things that were going on. And so one summer, my hair kept getting increasingly gross, and no one could figure out what it was. And by the middle of August, I go into my shower to see what is going on. And it seems that I had been shampooing my hair with deep conditioner for over 2.5 months. And so I had not washed my hair in that long, and I didn't care. So I was kind of one of those kids. But for a more defining moment, I think there was one day when a friend of mine and I had a weird interaction, and I thought it was something that I had done, and I was talking about it. And my mom said to me, she goes, you have no idea what's going on in her life. She could have gotten a bad grade on a test. She could have had a fight with another friend. She's like, do not assume it's you. Often when people are upset, it's something that's going on with them. And that just shifted everything for me. That blew my mind. This idea that, when someone is acting off or we have a bad interaction, that's the time to actually say, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? And not the time to take it personally.
That is so true. And usually I got to tell you that most of the times, especially in today's day and age, people don't have time to think about other people. I mean, of course, if something is brewing in their minds, the cycles may be going on and on. But that said, it is because something that's going on. So what a powerful lesson that your mom shared with you, and what an insight. And I'm sure that stayed with you for the rest of your life.
It did. And funny enough, it was kind of the first puzzle piece to the research and work that I'm doing today. Because back then it was, you don't have to care what other people think. You don't have to care about the reactions that you're getting from them because you don't know what's going on with them. And now it's about, I don't really have to care what I think either. And that's a really radical mindset shift that can help people a ton in their careers and in their confidence, etc.
That is so true. So, as you grew up, what interest did you have?
So for me, I was incredibly interested in reading. I spent all my time reading. I remember we were just talking recently, my brother, my mom, and I, and he was telling this story, and I was like, "What? I don't remember this at all." He goes, "Yeah, you were reading the entire time. You saw none of our childhood because you were in a book." So yeah, if I were to say my childhood in one word, it would be reading.
Oh, I can totally relate to that. I had an older sibling, but she was already in college by the time I was I was even entering, I don't remember, what grade school I was in. So technically, I was an only child, and we had a lot of trees in the backyard, and I loved taking books and just kind of climbing up trees and just losing myself because books open up the world and they can transport you anywhere. So I totally, totally get it.
Exactly.
And as you continued, which direction did your life take you in?
Sure. So then I went to undergraduate. I went to Duke and I started doing an economics degree because I thought that's what would be practical. And I was completely miserable. I didn't enjoy the content. I didn't enjoy the classes. And so in a fit of I need to really shake this up, it was the spring semester of my junior year. I said, I'm completely switching and I'm going to major in psychology, which were the courses I really loved. And so bizarrely, I was able to do it with some summer school classes in there. And I switched to a psychology degree and then loved it. And I loved the research. And so afterwards, I went and ran a lab at Harvard where we studied self-injury and suicidal thoughts in adolescents. And that was incredibly eye-opening to clinical research, essentially. I did that with an incredible professor named Matt Knock. And then after that, I went back to my PhD at Duke again, because I bleed blue and I love it down there. So did my PhD in psychology and then decided I didn't want to do the therapy route per se. I wanted to look at the systems level of the field. And so I went to McKinsey and Company and was a consultant for 5 years doing mental health work. And I ran their mental health service line. So we served people, we served providers, hospitals, we served insurance companies, we served the whole gamut around the globe. And just trying to improve the quality and access of mental health care, internationally. So it was really fulfilling work.
Well, fantastic. And sounds like you have had a very impressive career. So once you left McKinsey, where did you end up?
I ended up pregnant.
Congratulations.
I know that sounds strange, but yeah, the morning sickness, it was just really hard. It was impossible to think about traveling and having a baby. So I actually then pivoted and became a stay-at-home mom. And part of the reason, it was almost, I think I knew too much about how important early development is. And so I thought I really want to be there for my kid. And so I was a stay-at-home mom. And in the midst of this, my husband came in one day when I was just breading fish, and my child Buzzy was walking around. He was about 15 months old, so he was toddling. And he goes, I can't do this anymore. This is over. And it's so funny because I read in books, because that's all I used to do, was that people, they always use that term, people fell to the ground. And I thought that was just some literary thing to make it more dramatic. That
Right.
isn't. I actually fell to the ground. My legs completely gave out on me. And I was shocked. And so then the next several years were all about the divorce. It was all about restructuring our family. And it was an incredibly hard time. It got so hard. I got so low in the midst of this that I actually had the thought that the world would be better off without me. And I went and I called my parents, and I was lying. I remember this distinctly. I'm lying on the playroom floor, And so the screen is tilted, right? Because it's FaceTime. And I shared this with them and they're like, here we come. And so they immediately came out and stayed with me. And that was huge, to not be all alone going through this process. We were living in California and I'm a New Englander. So I felt very isolated there. So to have them there was huge. I got help. I went on an antidepressant and that really helped. And we got through. But what I noticed was 3 years later, my negative self-talk was still really high. Every time I tried to go off of my antidepressant, the voices would come back and they would say, you're damaged. You're different from everyone else. Everyone's going to look at you differently. And it was so bad that then I went back on the antidepressant to try to quell those voices. And I thought, this is enough. It's been 3 years. I have to be able to move on from this. And so I went back to my roots. I went back to academic literature and I learned the neuroscience of our thoughts, why we beat ourselves up so much. And we are so critical of ourselves all the time. And that science shifted everything for me. And so I immediately started titrating off my antidepressant. I didn't need it anymore. And I've started to feel more comfortable and confident than I ever have in my entire life. And so now that's where I'm in the process of publishing the book. And now I want to get this message out to everyone because it was so huge for me in my life.
Thank you for sharing. I really say that it takes courage to share your story, and you just shared it out. So really, really appreciate that, because I'm positive that there's so many people in our audience who may have faced that. And when they hear that story and those negative thoughts that run through each and every one of us, we are always questioning ourselves, or, well, always is a hyperbole, but that's saying that, there are times where we question ourselves, where we doubt ourselves. So you did mention that, you did a lot of academic research and you come from that. So why don't we kind of go into a deep dive and share with us, what are the default modes of our brain?
You bet. So what I learned is that our thoughts come from two networks. We always think of our thoughts as coming from us, and we've got this one set of thoughts and it is us, and this is our commentary on the world, right? That's actually false. And they found it in the neuroscience. And how it originally happened is they got people in MRI machines, and they were doing a vision test or a math test, whatever it was, to see the right areas. And they would start the test and they would get all the areas they hypothesized they'd get. And then they'd say, all right, well, you hang out for a few minutes. We have to now switch to the next module. And so the person would hang out in the MRI machine. And what these scientists noticed is that every time the people were just hanging out, the same areas activated. And this was true across the world. They reached out to their friends and they were like, hey, are you noticing this too? Are you getting these same areas when the person's not doing anything in the MRI machine? Everyone looked back at their scans. They said, yes, we are. So no matter what kind of test, visual, audio, whatever, and no matter what the population was that they were studying, it was consistent for all. And they called this the default mode network. Now, we've had a lot of research done on this, and I call this default mode network our tribal brain, because what they've discovered is that this network, these thoughts, harken back to when we were cavemen, and they served an evolutionary value. They helped us learn how to form and live in clans. And so essentially what this voice is, it's a survival system that's saying, hey, do you have the clan norms correctly? Are you doing your role correctly? Are you respecting the hierarchy well enough? Because if you're doing all that, then you get to stay in the clan, and therefore you would be safe. And if you somehow stepped out of line and got kicked out of the clan, that really spelled danger. No one can survive in the wilderness by themselves, right? So This voice, it's automatic. It pops up for all of us. And that was aha number one for me. We don't create these thoughts. So think of it like your stress system. If you're in a big presentation and then you just feel the stress happening in your body, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm stressed. It's that, you don't choose to be stressed. Your body just naturally does it. Well, that's exactly the same with these thoughts. Your body is naturally producing these thoughts to try to keep you safe. And that's the piece of this too, is that these thoughts, because they're so scared, they're critical. They're constantly telling you where you're not in line, or you're potentially going, this could be really risky. And they're critical in order to keep you safe. So there was evolutionary value to this incredibly negative voice we have in our heads, but it's super outdated to how we live today. And starting to have a relationship with this voice is a way to essentially shut it up forever.
Well, you are right on the mark. So let me ask you this: when you say about what is default mode network, what part of the brain is it?
It is next to your amygdala. It's called the ACC, and it's the medial prefrontal cortex. So if you think about the brain, and it grew from the inside, and we all have that concept of a reptilian brain, our most basic brain. And then it grew out to the mammal brain, and then it kept folding in on itself to then be our prefrontal cortex, which is our most sophisticated thought. That's our second brain area. This medial prefrontal cortex was essentially your first prefrontal cortex. So this is where these thoughts are probably unique to us and not to animals, because it is in the prefrontal cortex, but it's in the first prefrontal cortex. It's not in the part that developed later.
Absolutely. And amygdala, that reptilian brain, can act within microseconds. So this kicks in so fast. So coming from a biochem background, definitely this definitely makes perfect sense. So, okay, now our listeners may be saying that, okay, this is getting way too technical. So, okay, great. We know that this is a default mode network. We have that medial frontoparietal network going. Then we have your amygdala going. But how does it relay in a layman's term? And what is happening, so that way, like, people can realize, they're not at fault? Because so many times what happens is, oh gosh, I keep on having these thoughts, and so many times people are judging themselves, blaming themselves, and shaming themselves.
Yes. And so the way to understand these thoughts and how they're working in your life is that this tribal brain has three priorities. The first is in-groups and out-groups. So it's constantly trying to see where is the in-group and where is the out-group. And it's trying to see how you fit in. And it's scared to death of you getting out-grouped. So if you walk into a meeting and you see senior leadership there, your tribal brain will immediately say, okay, they're an in-group, I'm an out-group. I'm junior, I shouldn't say anything because they are the in-group, right? It says that when you're in social situations and you see a group of people talking and you start to feel anxious, like, do I have anything to add? Do they like me? Do they wish they were talking to someone else? That is you out-grouping yourself. We're desperately wanting to be in the in-group, and yet the tribal brain will freak out thinking that you're not. And the second thing it cares so much about is the hierarchy and your role. So what is the role you're supposed to be playing? And this is part of how we beat ourselves up all the time, because we look in society and we look at people that we want to be like, if we're an entrepreneur or if we're in a corporate situation, and we see how we don't fit with them. Either, we don't have the right education, or they have more experience than we do, or, what am I going to contribute to that? And this is classic imposter syndrome. It is when we see the role that we think we need to be playing, and yet we don't feel like we are matching up to what it is, then we will really beat ourselves up. And this is all just happening in your head, and it's happening automatically. I mean, so for me at McKinsey, what I struggled with a lot is that, you go into different industries. In the beginning, you kind of do a random walk, And you're in meetings with senior leadership of these companies, and you're supposed to have valuable insight into what's going on with them. And this just blew my tribal brain's mind, because it was, they have so much more experience than I do. They have seen so much more. What could I possibly add? So my whole time, I never wanted to talk. I just wanted to listen. I wanted to take notes. I did not want to, I didn't want to say a peep. I was scared I was going to say something stupid. I was scared they would hear how nervous I was. And this was my tribal brain showing me, like, in the hierarchy, they're really high, you're really low. You are not here to contest them. My tribal brain was perceiving it as like we were in competition, essentially. And I could say something bad and get kicked out. And it wasn't that at all. They were looking for fresh ideas. They were looking for ideas outside of the box, and I wish I had known this back then.
Oh, this is such a common complaint that I hear from so many of my clients, that they may be in a networking session if they're an entrepreneur, or they are in a meeting if they're in the corporate world, and they're like, oh, I don't have anything of value to contribute. And what if I'm saying and people think that I'm stupid? Or if I'm saying something that doesn't bring any value, especially in the presence of senior leaders. So when people are experiencing, based on your research and your personal experience, what are the first few steps that they can take so that they can move past this?
I deal a lot with imposter syndrome. It comes a lot because, it's something that people turn to regular therapy to try to figure out. And then when it doesn't work, they're looking somewhere else. And so that's where my coaching comes in. It's to say, if that's not helping, let's work on this a little bit differently from the perspective of the neuroscience. And so some of the first things we do is, first of all, we redefine the role. Like, what is the role that they're playing? And often I find that people make the role out to be far bigger and scarier than it actually is. And so if you can cleanly state what the role is, then that can help people a lot. The second thing is in-person interactions. So this tribal brain will run and run and run and run and run if you're just sitting by yourself thinking about your own job performance. And back when we were cavemen, we talked, we were around each other all the time. We got that feedback. Like, our in-person interactions are essentially a checks and balances for your tribal brain to tell you, what you said, you just stepped out of line. Don't do that. It can bring you down. It can show you what the norms are and how to be more polite, but it can also say, you're beating yourself up and stop. You're a really helpful piece of this puzzle. So I had one gal who was super scared of senior leadership. And she was scared that she was stepping on their toes, and yet the feedback she constantly got was, you need to assert yourself more. You need to take more of a leadership position. And she said, yes, but that's their job, and I don't want to make them feel that I'm competing for their job. I want to do my role really well and support them. So I said, you need to talk to your boss, and we need to talk through what this is. And so she goes and she tells him that this is how I am perceiving it. And he said, I'm just going to make up a name to keep her confidential. Carol, you've got this entirely wrong. He said, all of us, this is an up or out culture, and all of us are trying to get to the next level. And so the more you can take off my plate of my responsibilities, the more I can then stretch myself and do more director level responsibilities. He said, so the best thing you can do, the most supportive thing you could do, is to start leading in meetings. And this blew her mind. She suddenly wasn't competing. She was supporting by stepping into that role. And that really shifted things for her.
Yeah, no, very valuable insights right there. So many times what happens is that you hit the nail on the head, is about in-person interactions. And yet so many times what's happening is that when during this pandemic, people have been delegated back to their homes, and now most of the companies are requiring people to come back, but they have created this hybrid culture because it's much easier on people. That said, people don't realize the impact of not having that in-person interaction. So many times, like, people will say, like, I go there. Like yesterday, one of my clients was sharing that I go there, but the offices are empty. And it's even more depressing because people are choosing convenience over and comfort over going to the office and interacting with people. So how can we bring back that shift and awareness in people, like, hey, it's important to get back into that in-person interaction? It doesn't have to be 5 days a week, it can be 2 days a week, but it's really important to bring back that camaraderie and that confidence back within you.
The model I'm seeing that's working the best, and none of these are working that great, is when the company is incredibly transparent and saying, I get it. You guys don't want to come back in. So what we're going to do is Tuesdays, everyone has to be in. And so they define the exact day, so it's less of a wishy-washy. You don't know who you're going to see. If it is on Tuesdays, then everyone does show up. And I hear you. It is so critically important because there is that place of we need that in-person interaction to have that in-group experience, to feel as a corporation and as a team that we are a clan and we are striving for something together. I think we just need that from an evolutionary perspective. The other thing I'd say that we have lost some of, and it's essentially harder to do, it's less organic to do, is to have that one-on-one interaction. Because when you're in a team setting, you've put all the clan norms go into place. There starts to be a hierarchy, there start to be roles, there's the funny one, there's the smart one, there's this, and all of those dynamics start to come into play. And so you get less authentic information from someone in that kind of clan environment, if you will. And it's in the one-on-one conversations where then all of those dynamics fall away and you really can get some true answers from people. So that is another recommendation that is really helpful, is to seek out one-on-one time with the people whose opinion you care about the most. And you will get far more in that capacity than you will in any sort of group setting or just in passing.
No, absolutely. And I completely agree with you about that. One-on-ones, regardless whether it's in person or whether it's on Zoom, because unfortunately what is happening is that a lot of youngsters or Z-Gen and millennials, they're choosing to live in remote areas and doing remote work, and people are coming from, let's say, people are being hired from all across the US. And what happens is that even though the companies may mandate, like, okay, you got to come on Tuesday and Thursdays, most people, or quite a few people, are not even in town. So they're coming maybe once every 6 months or something like that. So one of the things that, like, as you're saying, having that one-on-ones, just even having a happy hour over Zoom, it still brings that connectivity. So what I'm hearing is that making that extra effort to build those relationships with individuals.
Yes. I think another piece that I'm seeing with my clients is that we are going through a period now where we're really redefining what leadership is. And a lot of imposter syndrome comes from people seeing an old type of leadership. And it's the one that lasted forever. And that was the person at the top has the most experience, the most knowledge. We all need to listen to what they say. And they're going to, help essentially champion all of us. So therefore, if I'm going to be a leader, I need all this experience. I need all of this knowledge. I need all this charisma. And we're starting to see that get poked, which is great, because that isn't what a leader is. That is a tribal brain view of leadership. That is that classic hierarchy with the person at the top, and then everyone has to listen to and follow what they say. But the reality of leadership nowadays is that the leader is the one that is on alert for where the company is going wrong. They're the ones that are willing to ask the harder questions. They're the ones willing to admit mistakes, and they're the ones willing to shift direction as quickly as possible. So something that can also help with people who are feeling nervous about stepping into leadership roles is redefine what leadership is. You don't have to have all the answers. You have to be the one asking the questions, and you have to have the courage to then recognize the mistakes and pivot from them quickly, because spoiler alert, there have always been mistakes, and it's just the leaders never really told us about it. But there have always been mistakes in business. And so we need to see that that is the reality of it, even if we've never talked about it before and we did have this glossy view of leadership. It's not that at all.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, that when you're stepping into leadership, if you are going to wait, like, oh, when I reach the director's level, then I'll start stepping into leadership, you're never going to reach that role, because unless you develop that muscle, and leadership is a muscle just like anything else, you gotta practice it day in and day out. Unless you're doing it, you'll not be able to get there. And yes, mistakes are going to happen. And will you feel mortified? Yes, you will. It's very natural. The thing is that it's how we take a situation and the meaning that we put to it. So, for example, okay, if you're going to fail, if you were to look at it as a learning experience and seeing other people, you really brought up a good point that, disrupting as to how do we see leadership is so critical, because when you are looking that anybody in any position can be a leader, bringing things up, shifting and pivoting, that's such a critical point. So we have talked about that. Do you want to share with us you had talked about the network? So more about the network, as far as you had mentioned about the hierarchies and in and out groups. Do you want to explain that a little bit, and how people can leverage this more?
Sure. So it's interesting, because with the part of your brain you actually really want to leverage is it's in your prefrontal cortex, and scientists call it the central executive network. And I call this the CEO brain. So when we focus on something, and I mean anything, you could be focusing on the color of the sky right now, it activates your central executive network. And so essentially, when you choose to have a thought, when you choose to identify a goal and go after it, or you see a problem and you choose to solve it, when you are essentially in control of your own brain, that's using the central executive network, your CEO brain. So we have these two pieces. Either our brain is controlling us, or we're controlling it. And so it's to recognize, when is my brain controlling me? And now it's time for me to take back control of my brain. It's time okay, so here is how I first started thinking about it that really helped. I thought, I am the CEO of myself, and I have some kick-ass employees. My eyes are amazing. I love them. I get to see everything, love my ears. That's awesome. Like, it's great to be able to hear sound. But I have this employee that sits in my office all day, and it whines about the fact that it never gets enough credit, and it whines about office politics and dynamics, and it is talking and talking, and I can't get anything done. So it is up to me to say, go back to your cubicle and go back to doing what you're, whatever you were meant to do, and then shutting the door and getting some peace. The tribal brain is like the Real Housewives of me. It will just go and go and go. And so the shift to make is to say, I don't want to listen to this anymore, and I want to focus my attention on something else. And it can be your breath. It can be your work presentation. It could be on the people in front of you, and really listening to what they're saying and being present with them. But just focus on something else, and you will start to feel all of that negative criticalness start to go away.
Powerful. So what I'm hearing is that how we can leverage the knowledge is that be aware. Okay, this is the tribal brain. I know it exists. It's not that I'm at fault. Understanding that, bring that awareness so that it acts as the fuel to help you shift the focus from what's happening to what could be happening, and bringing yourself back in control. And what a novel way of putting your brain, like, okay, this is an employee who is being completely unproductive. A beautiful way of putting it and shifting the focus. And this again kind of brings us back. I'm a fan of mindfulness and being a lifelong meditation practitioner. that when we shift the focus, we are activating our executive or CEO brain, and then that brings the control back to us. So
That's
this
a
is
really cool piece of literature, actually, because as a meditation fan, you're going to love this. So what they found in brain imaging scans is that typically our brain runs as tribal brain, tribal brain, tribal brain, a little bit of CEO brain when you decide to do something, and then you just go back to listening to your tribal brain. Meditators actually go CEO brain, CEO brain, CEO brain, a little tribal brain, and then CEO brain. And it was such a profound effect that they actually said, this is a new default mode wiring of the brain. So this is to say, the more we step out of that tribal brain, whether it's through meditation or whether it's just paying attention and being conscious of where we're focusing, that is shifting the brain to a place where then you will be able to do that everywhere. And it's such a happier place. It's a more peaceful place, and it's a more productive place to live. And that's so cool to me.
Definitely mindfulness, bringing our focus back to where it needs to belong. And you talked about two important things, peace and joy. So we are seeking peace and joy. So many times people are booking those vacations. People are looking for that promotions. People are looking for recognition. People are looking for a sense of belonging. And what's amazing is that we have it right within us. We go looking for it, chasing all around outside, and it's sitting right within us. So it's just a matter of bringing in that consciousness to the present moment. So what a powerful way of you bringing in. So do tell us about your journey, as you had shifted through, when you decided that yep, I want to titrate off antidepressants, and as to what are you doing in terms of maintaining that mindset. Are there any day-to-day activities or day-to-day brain exercises that our listeners and audience can take?
Sure. Yeah. So the one I used a lot was something I call move the dog. So in wolf packs, the alpha walks around when the pack is at rest and literally walks into other wolves' space, and is up to that pack member to then get up out of the space to say, Alpha, it's your space, and I respect your authority, and you get to be wherever you want to be. And if a wolf doesn't do that, if a wolf stays, and then that is essentially a fight, and the two of them will duke it out until whichever wolf wins then becomes the new alpha. So essentially, we have let our tribal brains be the alpha of our lives, and we've let it run how we feel. We have let it run what we believe. A lot of our self-limiting beliefs I think of as hardened tribal brain thoughts that we just keep on, we believe it, and then it becomes almost part of us. And then we shift everything because of what this brain is saying. We feel we have to get thinner. We feel we have to wear different clothes. We feel we have to work in finance when we really want to be doing marketing. I mean, we shift our lives according to what this thing says. So one of the things is to say, become the alpha of your brain. Whenever you hear this thing starting, say, nope. And then put your focus somewhere else. So where I felt it a lot, and granted, I did this at the mom stage in my life. I didn't do this in the career stage of my life. I really wish I had it then, because my tribal brain was nuts back then, right? But I'd be walking into where we were doing pickup, and I'd see all of these parents talking in groups, and I immediately have flared and was like, well, they're all friends and you're not, they're all connected, you're different. And every time it happened, it got to be funny, because this thing is really aggressively mean in ways it doesn't need to be. It's like, you're a loser. And no, you're not. What an obnoxious, to me, this is like the freshman roommate in college that you got stuck with, and that then you have to live with them for the year. I mean, this is like the freshman roommate you never wanted. I mean, so the more you listen to it, I mean, mine would say things like, well, they have lives and you don't. And that's not helping anyone. That's not a productive thought. And so as you start to listen to these thoughts, realize that you need to stick this little tribal brain in its loincloth and send it back to the cave, because it really serves you no purpose in our lives right now.
Very powerful. So do tell us a little bit about your book that will be coming out, and share with us where people can connect with you. Where can they find you?
Sure. So, what my book does, it essentially takes all of the coaching cases I get, the patterns in the coaching cases I get, and it talks through the tribal brain side of it, and then what to do to stop it and shift your life. So this is if I'm feeling stuck and unmotivated is one. One is I feel like I'm a bad mom and, everything I do is wrong and I yell at my kids and I hate it. It's that case study. It is the case study of imposter syndrome, what we've talked about here today. Another case study is I don't fit in, when you just feel different and you feel bad about yourself from it. So that will be coming out soon, and you can watch on my website and sign up for my newsletter, www.betsyholmberg.com, and I bet it'll be in the links. And so, stay tuned. And I also continue to do coaching, so feel free to reach out on that as well.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for joining us and sharing such valuable nuggets. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
It was a pleasure to be here, Divya. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, listeners, and thank you, audience, for being part of our family and reaching out to us and letting us know what is it that you want. Because when you let us know, we are able to bring experts that can help you live the life you want and live the life you deserve, and live it with happiness, peace, and joy. And thank you, Juan, for all the technical support. So, folks, until next time, be well and take care.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.